Today we're talking about the Season 8 Conquest map and more specifically what I would like to see in Season 8 on the Conquest map. So far we don't have any direct info from Hi-Rez out of just the tiniest bit of data mining about some, well, minions basically returning. So I figured now is a good moment to say, hey, this is something I'd like to see implemented before the whole map is completely finished and there is no way to really give any significant feedback anymore. In the same sense, I think this video's comment section could also work very well as a pool of ideas for Season 8. So if you have anything to contribute that you would like to see in regards to the map, then maybe this is a good place to write it down. So maybe someone from Hi-Rez will see it as well. If there are very interesting ideas that haven't been mentioned at all, then I might bring them up at a later point as well. Let's first briefly talk about the status quo, what our current map is right now. I do think that the current Conquest map is a relatively balanced one. In terms of size, in terms of layout, there are a lot of things that feel more balanced than on previous maps. At the same time, I also think that this map is probably one of the, if not the most boring maps that we've had so far. I do think that the mid-season patch has improved this just a little bit through having some more mini interactions, but the map is very much streamlined in many ways to be as efficient as possible and kind of got a little bit ugly in the process of that and kind of a little bit, well, uninteresting in my opinion. Of course, this is personal preference, but I do think that, for example, the color theme of the map is not particularly interesting, and that is something that I'd like to see changed. And that is the first point as well. I think the theme of the map is fine, but the current execution feels a little bit sloppy. For example, I do think that the concept of dividing the map into two different parts is interesting, but currently that means that one side gets the uglier side and the other one gets a nicer looking side, in my opinion. Again, I think the Chaos side just isn't as nicely designed. And I also do think that that split could be done differently and still look very nice. So for example, what could be done is that instead of having the split go down the exact middle of the map, it could be a split that is more similar to the old solo lane and it's leaning toward that side. So say the solo side of the map, including the jungle, would be chaos themed or maybe like the old map, like lava themed or something. And then you'd have darker creatures there, even in the jungle. You have the fire giant, which is fitting with that theme, and you have a relatively dark solo lane. And then the split itself stops around the middle lane. So it's really that solo lane in itself that is dark, rather than one half of every lane being dark. And then on one half of the map, the corruption, so to speak, could basically stop around the Phoenix area, whereas on the other half, on the chaos side, the corruption would spread all the way across the Titan, across the base area as well. That way you could preserve this split theme between chaos and order, but also implement different styles to different parts of the map, to different lanes. Now, I don't know if this is something that solo laners want in general. I thought the old lava solo lane was interesting enough, but it wasn't my favorite style of the entire map. But I think it would be at least a different appeal from having this half split that we have right now, because honestly that rift in the middle is more distracting and weird than anything to me personally. Generally speaking, I would also like to see brighter visuals, maybe even on the solo lane. Maybe it would just be a lava lane with glowing hot lava or something, but especially towards the other lanes as well. I really like that about the previous Conquest map, where the skybox was a lot brighter. There wasn't this whole muted color theme going on. There was a lot of gold, yellowish tones, everything, and obviously the beach. I think the beach was one of the nicest parts of the Conquest map, and I really hope that the beach will come back in some form, ideally with the crabs. While I do understand that this was maybe not the most optimized design in terms of distractions or something, I think it gave the map a lot more character than the current one has. I also think that implementing certain aspects from the Siege map would be really cool, because what I really like about the Siege map is the jungle, and I think it works very well with the Mayan theme, and I would not be opposed to mixing different themes on the Conquest map. I think it would be cool to have a Mayan theme in the jungle, or a part of the jungle, for example, where you could have little totem poles or something, and then you have that thick, luscious forest above you. And at the same time, on the other side of the map, you could have something that's Norse-themed, for example, or Greek-themed. Maybe Norse, maybe even snow or something. I think there's a lot of unexplored territory for the styles of the map, because it's always been so confined to the simplistic concept of being, well, sticking to one theme primarily. And I think if they just went a little bit wild with that, that could make the whole map more interesting and more alive. And speaking of alive, there's obviously the conversation of fog as well. There was recently some posts going around, started by Weekend, I think, about removing the fog through settings, and then Hi-Rez was kind of like, yeah, but you shouldn't do that in competitive, and now we're changing the settings for fog anyway, so everyone has it. The problem with fog at the moment is that I think it's implemented in a way where it's not necessarily adding much, because it doesn't change your vision range or anything. It doesn't really seem scary or anything, it seems a little bit redundant. And I think the fog could be implemented in much cooler ways. I would like to see, for example, fog just being in one jungle area. Again, if we go with a Mayan theme, we could have a jungle with a little bit of fog, and maybe have a direct impact on your vision as well. Maybe it shortens your vision in that particular area, making invades easier and more interesting. Or maybe you could use fog in a way that brush is used in League of Legends, where there are certain areas with very heavy fog and you could actually hide in the fog temporarily. I think there's a lot of mechanics that are interesting and unexplored. We know, for example, that there was the deep brush mechanic in one of the adventures way back in the day, where you could hide in the brush much better, and it was, I think, tested for Conquest at the time, but they never actually implemented it. And that's also something that I think would be really cool, just have some places where you can actually hide on the map and surprise the enemy. And then there's a bit more of a technical aspect. What I think is very annoying with the current Conquest map is ward placement in, well, non-competitive levels of play. On the old Conquest map, there were very straightforward places to ward, and people would actually ward a lot more because they knew exactly where their wards would go. Now a lot of ward spots are less rewarding due to various pillars being around them and the whole jungle being a little more winding around and everything. And I think the jungle in itself is fine, but I think there should be these very predetermined central ward spots that keep their effectiveness, so that people will know where to ward even on a lower level of play. This may lead to some difficulties on higher levels of play, like trying to find a balance there is always complicated, but I think it just heavily discourages warding until at least mid-level of play, when you don't really know where to put them as well as you used to. And I don't think that just for the benefit of the highest level of play, this should be restricted. I think that it's more beneficial here to generally make warding accessible and then try to balance around the higher level of play in other ways somehow. The size of the map and the width of the jungle as well as the lanes is obviously a conversation to have as well. I do think that's mostly fine at the moment. I do think that there's enough travel time on the map without it being too much travel time. I would not be opposed to a slightly larger map, but I don't think it should be made smaller again. Then there is the option of side jungles. I do think with how the meta has shifted over time and how there are certain camps that are simply mostly killed by lanes, I would not be entirely opposed to small side lanes. I don't think they should be as drastic as they used to be back in the day, but I think it would make for some interesting new areas to use for just a little bit. Just put one of those annoying farm harpies to a side lane, to the side of dual lane. That alone would change a lot, and I think it would be interesting. It would be especially cool if that actually implements the beach part, and then you can actually walk down to the beach just to get a little beach enemy. Just turn that harpy into a crab or something. Crab for extra farm, maybe one centered in the map so that both dual lane sides can compete for this crab, and then you have a little bit of an extra objective. I think that would be very interesting. I think that would be very cool. And adds some size to the map and something to do without necessarily making the rotations slower with it. And the same could honestly be done on solo lane as well. You could do it with the totem, for example, though that may slow down jungles coming over there, but that's about it. I don't think most junglers care particularly much for the totem. There is obviously the issue of the visual clarity of abilities. That is why the current map is so simplistic and a little bit Play-Doh-ish. And I hope that Hi-Rez finds a way to maintain this visual clarity for abilities on the ground especially, while also making the surrounding area a little bit more attractive. I think this is a lot about making the floors as simple as possible, while still giving them some sort of texture, but making the surrounding walls and everything, well, full of life and everything. But it could be leading to distraction through that as well, so we'll see where the point of balance there is and how far they want to go. But I really hope that they're going a bit more into the visual appeal direction again. I really like the changes to the jungle camps, so I'd like to see more of that. I think we could have some more small minions. We have a lot of harpies on the map at the moment that really all have the same purpose. We could have different minions visually there, maybe with different attacks. Maybe some of them could have an AoE attack or something. Just something small to add to them and make them behave a little bit differently. And also hopefully something new for speed buff, because I really don't like the current mechanic. It just makes kiting the camp super annoying, and with the damage being increased you can't just stand in it anymore. So that just feels obnoxious without really any purpose. The other changes to the other camps I think are actually really good. And then there's one thing that's not quite related to the map, but I think has a major impact on how the map is played as well. I would like to see some increased rewards for getting guard kills, both in terms of gold and XP. I think at the moment it's just too rewarding to play most of the game heavily PvE focused, and we see that quite often when you have a jungler that's very ahead in kills, but then basically the same level as others in terms of farm, because they've just been sitting in lane farming every single wave. And I don't think that's exactly fun. I think there is an issue with snowball potential if you crank up those values too much, but I do think there is a better balance point that we have right now, one where PvE is just a little bit less of a factor, or PvP is a bit more of a factor rather. And last but not least, one thing that I would love to see is terrain difference, where you could go up on a platform basically, and while walking up you're a little bit slower, and while walking down you're a little bit faster, but I don't think that will happen. I want to throw it out there. I would love to see something like that, like just a little bit of an idea. They take that over a little bit from Paragon or something. Just get a little bit of an advantage by using the terrain in your favor, just some little hills or something, but I don't think it's possible within Smite's current systems, basically the restrictions of how the game is built, so I doubt it's going to be the case. I think it would be very cool though. Oh, and I almost forgot, something that's also relatively unlikely to be seen in game, but would also be really cool, is temporary pathways. You may remember this from some of the adventures where there's just like paths that you have to time right, because there's like stepping stones that disappear or something. And I think that would be really cool if there's an opportunity to use that for ganks or something and then get away and the enemy can't follow you because, well, there is no path in that moment. That would be super interesting, but I have a feeling that Hi-Rez would not implement that, especially because the punishment of dying for just falling down by mistiming that is a little bit high in something like Conquest, and I feel like they wouldn't want to balance around that with characters that have pulls and grabs and all that kind of stuff. Maybe there could be something where you just can't pass that way when the path is not there, instead of you dying for it. But yeah, I have a feeling it's not going to happen, though I think it would be very cool as well. Again, if you have any more ideas, suggestions, drop them down below. And other than that, thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please sub button and maybe the bell, so that you get notified of future Smite videos. And other than that, see you for the next one soon. Duke Sloth, out.